Hey everyone and welcome back to another video. In this one we are going to build a HTML JavaScript CSS slider in which you are going to click some arrows and the images would slide. Now we are going to have two variations of it. One is going to be a very basic JavaScript slider in which we would have one image element on the DOM and then we are just going to swap which image is shown. But in the other one, we are actually going to have multiple image elements on the DOM, but only one would be active and it would slide in front of everyone. So that's going to be even more interesting. So by the end of this video, you're going to have two variations of the JavaScript image slider. And this is really good for practicing HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe to the channel for further notifications and check out other videos as well. So without further ado, let's get started. A new project, so we are going to say mkdir. We're going to create it with, and we are doing it with in HTML CSS plain. So no React, no fancy stuff. We're just going to make it really simple. We're going to say JS image slider. We're going to open it, JS image slider, and there we go. So we're going to paste the images folder here. So we now have the images folder and now we are going to style from scratch. Now we're gonna go ahead and create an index.html and then we are going to press shift and exclamation mark just like this and hit enter, and there you go. We got the basic HTML out of the box. It's really nice. You don't have to do much. And now I'm going to open this into live preview. So we say live preview, show preview external browser or internal browser. So I can say internal browser, for example, right now. And there we go, the best of the best. So in here, we are going to say, for example, test, and you can see that we see it right away. It's a really nice way to start working on stuff. So now we can start with the whole layout and the CSS. So I'm gonna create two files. I'm gonna first create the script.js, and also we are going to create style.css. We can either use Tailwind CSS or we could also use Bootstrap. Either of those would work. So I'm gonna get this one in, but there is a catch actually. So we are going to build it with a container. So let's first lay out our whole UI. So if we look at the implementation that they have done, this one, and they do have it here. So JS image, JavaScript image slider. So this is what they have there. So we are going to use the same thing. And we're using the live server to build that. So it's going to be very simple for now. So we're going to have a container. Inside, we're going to have the slider itself, and we're going to give this a class. So slider, and then in the slider, we would have some images. So we're going to have, for example, an image tag. We could have either the image right there, or yeah, I think we shouldn't have the background, but rather the image. So I'm going to have just one image in there. And then there's going to be, so we could rather have an arrow left and image and then an arrow right. So once you do so, you are going to have all the HTML created. So this is Emmet working in VS Code that allows you to quickly generate the HTML that you want. So we have a container, a slider, arrow left, and then we got image and arrow right. So we're going to assign these arrow left and arrow right with some images. We can copy it from the other one, but yeah, that's what's going to be it. So for now, what I'm going to do is we have the images here. So we have left arrow, right arrow. So in here, we are going to first have the image tag. So we're going to have an image with a source of left arrow dot png. And then we should also have one for the right arrow. So I'm going to quickly paste it here. This should be right arrow.png, and the sources should also define that it's going to be images. And you can see that this is super cool. So now we got two images that are huge, and now we can style those things. So first of all, let's go with the container. So the container should have a max width of, let's say, 960 pixels and should have a margin 0 auto. So we got the container here, and then we are going to make this element that we have the slider. So the slider should have everything in line, in one line. So we should have these arrows and the image in between. So for the sake of simplicity, right now we're going to use the image one. So let's go to the HTML, and here we can say that the images image1.png is going to be there. Now, if you have a look at the live server at the moment, you will see that everything here is first horrendous and they're not in line. So the slider is supposed to have those in line. So we're going to go to our style CSS and then style it. So container slider, and the slider should be a display flex. So they are in one line. And also let's make sure that the slider has the slider class. Yes, it does. And we got a container as well. And we also include the SCSS because we haven't. So we are going to, or the CSS file. So we're gonna say link, and this link tag is gonna have the href. This should be styles.css, and we're gonna close if I can find the button here. And then also this should be a relative or rel style sheet, and this should be css. All right, and is it style css? Yeah, there's style css. So now you can see that they are actually in one line, and that is because we made this display flex. If we remove this, you can see that they are right now in a vertical manner. All right, so now that we have this, then we have container slider, and then we have got an image, and we're going to call this the main image per se. So let's wrap it up inside another div. So we can say div, and inside here. So this is going to be having a class. We can say active image, and we're gonna go ahead and say this active image can have a max width of 300 or 400 pixel per se. Let's make it 300 pixel. So it looks like this. Now you see that this has taken the image width accordingly, but then we have like the arrows, they are huge. So what I'm going to do is we are also going to give this arrow a class. So we can say arrow. So I can use that on both of them. And in this case, we can have the styles saying container, arrow. If that's the case, then a max width of them should be a 120 pixel, maybe. And then the image is inside, because now what we have done is that we have limited the width of the container, but the image itself is huge. So we need to say that the image inside is going to take a maximum width of 100%, so they don't get outside. So I'm going to say 100%, just like this. And you can see that now they don't get outside. Now that we have laid out the left arrow, the right arrow, and also the image, you can see that it's not centered. Since we are using display flex, we could use the align items center, and you can see now they are centered. Super cool. And when we have this sorted out, the only thing that's remaining is to implement the JavaScript side of it, for which we are here, right? We're not here for stupid HTML and CSS, or maybe we are. I am. So actually what I want to do is, in terms of HTML semantics, it's a good idea to have a class when you really need it multiple times. Otherwise, if there's just one time, then you should rather use an ID. So you could use like a left arrow and right arrow instead of putting a class like arrow left or arrow right. So left arrow, and then the right arrow is right there. So we're gonna remove the arrow right class. We're also going to remove the arrow left class, and I think we're good. Now that we have this, we can also give this container a bit of margin from top, so it's not like stuck to the top. So I'm going to quickly go ahead and first put this. Cool. We have the margin on container, but we have a 0 auto. So we could do like, it goes, if you have 4 of them, it's like top, right, bottom, and then left. So we're going to give this a 30 pixel top. The right is auto. The bottom is 0, and the left is auto as well, right? And now what we could do is just implement JavaScript. So we're going to have a script tag here, and we can say this is going to be deferred. The source is going to be script.js. I think then also there's like type text JavaScript, and I think that should be good. So now we can simply say alert, hello world, and is it script.js? Yes. And I don't see alert because live server probably doesn't show that, right? But if I do document.body.style.background color equals to red, then it works. So that means our JavaScript is working. So background color red or color red is actually the console log of CSS. So if you ever want to see if it's working, you're going to do that or that. Awesome. So now that we have this working, let's talk about the scripting side. So what we want to do is when we have this deferred and this is working, then we definitely want to listen to the click handlers for this left arrow or right arrow, right? And what we have is, first we should have an array of, let's call it an array of different images. So we can fetch those. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 as an images. So what we are going to do is we are going to create an array and we are going to say images. And here we're going to say that we got image 1.png, and then we're going to just copy paste it without any shame, and then 2, 3, 4. And now that we have this, we can start looking for the point where we click. We should have the default image assigned. So we can also say let active image equals, and we can say images first. So the first image is now going to be selected. Then we should have a function of setting an image. So we can say set active image equals, and then we are creating an arrow function. Here we can say active image equals something. And here we are going to get the image, or we can say target image. And then we assign this target image to active image. And then what we do is we can get the element that is the image, the main image. So we are going to give this an ID. I think I'm going to remove this element and put the image there. And then also change the styles from the active image to rather the ID of the image. So I'm doing it a bit fast, but let me tell you what I'm doing. So I've removed the container of this active image, and I'm going to rather give this element, this image, an ID. So I can say ID active image, and then I'm going to update the styles to rather target the active image via ID. So the styles would still be the same, as you can see, right? So now that we have this set, both of them set, I'm going to save this file as well and the JavaScript as well. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the active image element and assign it. So I'm going to say const active image element equals document. We only need it once. So we can say document.query selector or get element by ID, either works fine. So here the name of the element here is active image, or the ID here is active image. So we can use that. And now that we have this, or we could say rather this current image, we can say current, or active image, we can say current image, to just have a different name. So we have images array, which contains 4 different images. Then we got a current image, which would show the current image that is being displayed. Then we have an active image element. You could also call it current image element, whatever. So we say active image here, and then what we need to do once we assign the target image to current image, we can go here and say something like active image element dot source, and then we can say, or actually we can say set attribute src. We are going to pass this like here. So we are saying set attribute. I'm going to close this so we have more window to see. So active element set attribute source, and then we are going to say simply images slash and then image. Now there are 2 things you could do. You could either set this images in here because we get it from the images folder, or you could do it right here. So it's totally up to you. I would rather do it here than add it there, because yeah, it's a string anyways. So rather we can just use the target image instead of doing all that magic. Once we do this, I think we should be good. So by default, when we start the program, we're going to have this situation where we are having current image equals to image 0. So what we are doing here is we are saying let current image equals maybe null in the beginning. And then we go ahead and we say something like set active image is 0. Now this has set the current image to 0. How do we know? If I change this to 2, what would happen? You can see that it sets it. So our code is working absolutely fine now. I can change it to 1. You can see that it changed. I can set it to 3. You can see it change. If I set to 4, nothing would happen because we only have 0 to 3 indices here. So by default, we set it to 0. This is our program. So our program starts, we define all the images. We set the first image to null initially. Then we get the active element, this guy. Then we call the set active image method with the first image, and it sets it right there, right? Now we need to bind events to the arrow left and arrow right. So what we are going to do is we are going to say something like document dot get element by ID, and this is going to be the left arrow and the right arrow. So let's take those variables up top right after we are taking the active image. So we can say const left arrow here. So we're going to do a document.get element by id, and we're going to say left arrow, and we can rename this to left arrow element, and then we can copy paste without hesitation right arrow element, and this should be right arrow. So let's talk about left arrow. So when left arrow has been clicked, we are going to assign a click handler to it. And then what we need to do is to just see where we are in this whole slider thingy. Are we at the moment where the image itself? So there are two things actually. One, we have one image on the view, and when we click this, it just changes. But to be honest, in a real slider, we would have all the images and sliding into like the main viewport. That's going to be interesting, but we don't have that yet. So we're gonna do something about that in a bit. So when we click this, we are going to just look into where we are and we are going to reassign it. So first of all, we can get the current index equals, we can say images dot index of current image. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to the browser rather, so we can have live server, and then there should be an external live server, stop live server. Okay. Live preview, is it live preview, stop server, and then we have a live preview. There was one that said external, it says open with live server. There we go. So now we have it. I do see now some problems, so we are going to quickly fix those as well. For example, first one is in here you can see that we have the HTML, then we got the container, right? And then we have the slider, but this container is centered, although the slider is not. There's some big arrows. Yeah, we're gonna make them small, don't worry. So in here we got this slider, and this is not centered, so we are gonna go to styles, and in here the slider we are going to say justify content center, and there we go, we got this centered now. Now let's talk about the arrows. We can also make the max width 120 and also the max height 120 pixel. So if we do that, nothing changes because it's still big. So we're going to make it something like a 50 pixel. And let's see. And we also need to make the max width, the max height to 100%. This should have a height of 50 pixel. And now we have these arrows in a good manner. Although you would see that the arrows are quite close to all of this. Now, what we could do is either we could create a gap in between, but rather what I would want to do is still to have this item clickable. So let me show you what I mean. So when I do a gap, in this case, if I say gap 16 pixels, for example, or 20 pixels, you would see that now we have a gap. These are now far away. But if I have to actually click this, I would have to click them right here, right? Like this is the clickable area, this white thing. But if I wanted to have a wider area like here and here as well, then you would use padding. Exactly. So instead of gap, we could go ahead and say the padding, and it should be 0 and maybe 30 pixel. So now we have this whole area where we can click. So this is now the entire area where we would have them. Super cool. Now that we have this, let's quickly go ahead and bind the event listeners. So when we have the left arrow, we are going to get the current index, and then we are just going to console.log the current index for now. Current index. So in this case, we have applied this to the left arrow. So if I go to my console and if I click this left arrow, you can see that the current index is 0 because that's the one that we are using. If I change this to 3, save this, you can see that we have a different image. And if I click here, you can see that we get the current index 3. So we are saying, hey, find the index of the current image within the images, and we get that. Then what we need to do is we just need to provide a lesser index. If it's 3, we need to now set the current image to 2. That's pretty much it. So what we are going to do here is we are going to say the set active image to the current index -1. So we can say images current index -1. Now this would have a problem, and we are going to talk about what that would be. So now that I have this, if I click this, you can see that it goes to the previous image. If I click this again, previous image, previous image. So this works fine. But there's a problem. One problem that I saw was the height here is 225 pixel. If I click this, this height is 200 pixels. So there's a difference of 25 pixels. What we would want to do rather is to have the same height for our sliders, because yeah, we don't want our elements to grow. For example, you could see that here, then it shrinks down, then it goes there, and then also it kind of shrinks down a bit because I think this is 189. So the height constantly changes. So rather than this, what we could do is we could give this a particular height. Let's say the height of the slider is always going to be 200 pixels, right? And then the image that we have, the height of the image should always be 100%. Now this would mean something, and we are going to talk about what that is. So in this case, the slider, it's 200 pixel now. The image in this case is, or the active image, it's going to take 100%, so it's going to be 200 pixel. Now if I look at the slider, let's see what happens. So slider is 200, the image itself is 200 as well, right? So if I now change this, you can see that the width increased a bit, but the height, it didn't. So instead of this maximum width, I'm gonna call this a width. So the width also remains the same all the time. So in this case, if I now change this, you can see that our slider does not move. But I talked about the problem. The problem that we talked about is if we keep going like this is what would happen, because we keep decreasing the index, and at some point the index becomes 0, and then we don't really have anything beyond index, because if you still have those console log, can I put the current index like this? Yeah, I can. There's a really nice extension called turbo log, and you can just press Control Alt L and it basically logs everything. It creates a log message. So here you can see that the current index is 3, 2, 1, 0. And this current index, when it's 0, the next applied index is actually 1. So if I wanted to rather log this target image, we could see that as well. So let's say this current image is what we are logging here. So the first time it was images, image 4, image 3, image 2, image 1. And now if I hit this, you can see that it's undefined, so it is not going to work. So what we need to do is that if this index becomes less than 0, then we definitely need to set it back to the length of image. So we could just put it like this. So if, and we need to make this let instead of current index. So if the current index minus 1 is less than 0, then what you could do is you could say current index equals images.length minus 1, which means that we are going to reset it to the rightmost image. So we're going to go ahead and say this. So if it's less than 0, then we set it this, else we do a current index minus minus, right? So let's try this out now. So we're going to go to sources and debug this like actual programmers, and yeah, not console loggers. So we're going to do that. So we're going to go to sources and scripts, and here we're going to debug it. So when we click this, it takes the index. The index itself is 3 in this case. I'm going to zoom in a bit. Then it checks this index, no problem. So current index minus minus becomes 2, and then we get the next image. Similarly, we click this, we get the next image. We click this, we get the next image. And now if I click this, it's going to come here. It's going to see that the current index now is 0. Now this is where our logic basically falls, because this should not be less than, it should be equal. Because right now it's not going to go, or actually no, it's fine. It's going to say current index 0 minus 1, which is going to be minus 1. And then it's going to go inside here. And now it's going to say images.length, which is 4. And the last index that we already know is 3 right here. So it's going to take 3 and assign it here. And then there we go. So now we have sort of an infinite loop with the slider, which is what we actually wanted. Similarly, we're going to go ahead with the next right arrow element. So right arrow element, we're going to get the current index. And then we are going to check the opposite side. So if we are going forward and we hit a point where the index or the next index would be 4 instead of 3, because we have 0, 1, 2, 3. If the next index would be 4, then we're going to reset it to 0. So let's say we say current index plus 1 equals images.length. If that's the case, then we are going to set the current index to 0. Otherwise, we do current plus plus. So let's try this out now. So I'm going to go ahead and now try next. So you can see that from the last image, it actually went to 0. So I'm going to clear this, refresh. This is image 4. And if I go ahead this, now you can see it switched to image 1, forward, forward, forward. And now this works fine and this also works fine. Yay! Awesome! How about that? So we are going to talk about how can we implement a way of sliding these rather than just this JavaScript clicker. So this is enough for us, for example, if we talk just about JavaScript, but if we want a real slider that kind of comes in like poof, poof, then that would be more interesting to see how we can implement that. So let's go through CSS and improve this to like 500 pixels. And these could be, the arrows could be 220 and maybe 100. And let's see. Oops. Wow. Did we also have a height of the slider? Let's make it 500 pixels as well. Now, the only problem that I see is then every image is going to be stretched. We don't really want that. So we're gonna make sure that the slider's aspect ratio is maybe 16:9. I believe that only applies to the images, to be honest. It's going to be always a decision that one has to make, yeah, based off of the business case. But maybe let's put it 16:9 for now. We would also probably have to do an object fit contain. So the width would still change, but then you would notice that the slider itself, that doesn't change, right? So the images could change, but the slider wouldn't change. In a usual situation where you would have certain images for a slider, the best way would be to have them as close as possible or actually the same width and height. So the slider can adjust it and also the aspect ratio. But I believe if the images are equal in size, this wouldn't be a problem, but they're in different size. So I think right now we can assume that this is going to happen. So that's fine. All right, so we increased the height and width a bit. We also increased the arrows a bit. I believe we can still drill down the arrows to maybe 80 pixels. Yeah, this looks much better. This should also have sort of a pointer. So we can say arrow should have a cursor pointer, so you know when you have to click them. And if I go to my index.html and see the arrow itself, so these are the arrows that we have. And this is interesting because now what I'm trying to see is what happened to the padding. So we got the slider, we got the left arrow. The arrows should have, we could reduce the width, to be honest, but we should have a complete height. So we say 100%, not pixels. So they have 100% height because we want the padding there, right? But what we also want in this case, so we got this right arrow, the height is 100%. The slider itself is about 281 pixel. So let's say we give this a height of 280 pixels, right? And now because the parent doesn't have a height, that's why the children do not get 100%. If we give the slider itself the height, the child elements of the children, you can see that they get the full height, which is actually what we want. So yeah, instead of 280, the slider itself, we can give this a height of 282 pixels. And then these would have to be centered. So then the arrows themselves should have a display flex, an align items center, and a justify content center as well. So they are centered now. Now you would notice that as soon as I come here, we see this pointer, right? This is what I wanted. So the user knows that, hey, this needs to be clicked. And now that we have this, we can also put a hover state to this. So they change when we hover. So something like this. So we say arrow, hover, and here there should be, for example, we could just say opacity 0.6. And then you would notice that as soon as I come here, they change the opacity. So we know something's happening. Maybe we could say even 5 like this. So you can see, right? You can see that this is very like snappy and they're not smooth. So we should probably also have a transition here. All ease, and then we can say 0.3 seconds. So it's like this now. Maybe 1 second. So it's a bit faster. Nope. Yeah, I think this is much better. So you could click it and then it would change the slide. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first commit this because a good dev always commits their code to make sure that if the word goes down, the code is still up. Yes. So we're gonna go and say git init, git add dot git commit m JavaScript slider code, and then we are going to rename the branch. So git branch m, from master we are changing this to main. Alrighty, so now we switch to a new branch, git checkout b js css slider, and then we start working on this. So I'm going to close this guy, and now let's talk about the CSS part. Now the fun part comes in. This time we don't really need one image here, we're rather going to have 4 of them. That's what's going to make this interesting. So we're going to go ahead and first create a container here. This is going to be the image container, so we can call this class images container. We're going to remove this, and we are going to have nothing initially. Now when we start, we're not going to have any images, right? So we're going to rather have the images created initially. So we are going to have a function. We're going to call this create images. Then what we are going to do is we are going to say images dot for each image, and then we do document dot create element image. So we create an image, we can say const imgl. So we create an image element on the fly. Then we say img element dot set attribute source, and here we assign the image variable, which is this image. You could also rename this to something like image source, for example. And then we append it to this container element. So we say images container, and then we append it. So document, we could also get it once. So const container element equals document dot query selector. Since we are getting it from a class, we can get it like this. And then we can use container element dot append. And here we go with the image element, right? Once we do this, you're going to see that all of the images are supposed to be rendered here. So the set active image is being called here. So I'm going to comment this out because yeah, this doesn't work at the moment. So right now we are going to create the images. So I can call this create images. And you can see that we got all the images right here. Okay. Now let's see if they're all there. I can see 3 images. That's interesting. And I need to see all the elements. So body, there are 4 images. One is like, I don't know, way beyond the view for some reason. So in this case, we do have the container, we do have the images, right? So if I look at the styles here, for the active image, we had these styles, but we're going to change this a bit. So instead of active image, we're going to take the container and style the container instead. So like this. I'm going to remove the aspect ratio and the object fit from contain there. And I'm going to create another style for an image. So I'm going to say container slider images container image, and then I'm going to put this there. Now you can see that we got 4 of the images, and all of them are like here in this element. So images container is this small. You see the highlighted box here, that one, that's where the images would come in. Now the fun part there is we don't want to show all of the images. We only want to show one of the images. And in addition to all these styles, we are going to make this the container having a position of relative, right? But then for each image, we are going to make the position absolute, right? When we make everything absolute, you will see that each image actually belongs to the same place. They all start from here, from the 0 position relative to the container. So we have this images container, which starts from the same place. The absolute position also starts from the same place. If I give this left of, let's say 10 pixel, you will see that all of them would start doing the same thing. Actually, let's make it 100 pixels so it's more visible. Now you will see that this image container starts from there, like at the very corner, but these all have the left 10 pixel. Now I can give them different values, but that would also work. So the only thing that we need to do now is to show or hide them one by one. So if I was to give this image an absolute, I would also give this a transition all is, and we could say 0.3 seconds. Now the only thing that I'm concerned about is the position of left and whatnot. So by default, let's suppose we have this situation where we click this left element. What we would want to do is to take the next one or the current one out of the screen to left and take the next one in from the left side. So that's going to be super interesting. Or what we could do is just assign them all their transform values and then select the one that is in the middle. So they would change their transform positions. So I'm thinking, which way should we go really? What's going to be easier? The transform one or just getting the current one out of the screen and the next one to come into the screen? So yeah, let's talk about the styles here. So I think we can start with basic 2 images and then move gradually from there. So I'm gonna remove these two. So we only have 2 to take care of. And now let's talk about the styling of it. So in this case, I would say by default, every image should have a left position set to minus 100% and opacity 0. So if I look at this now, you can see that there's no one there, right? None of the images are there. Now, what I could do is I could say that, hey, the one that's going to be selected is going to have another class called active. So for that one, we are going to style it like this. So image.active. All right, so I'm going to make this one left 0 and opacity 1. So now let's put the logic there. So whenever we click these arrows, we're going to find the current active element and we are going to just change it. So we don't have the active image element there anymore, to be honest. So I'm going to remove this and we're going to find this here. So active image element is going to be the one that has the target image. How do we find the active element? We're going to find it by the class of active element. So we are going to just say, hey, just put the active class to that element. So right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the active image element by using the class image.active, or actually let's try to find it properly. So images container. So we're going to say images container image.active. This is going to be the active element. So let's say we got 2 images. In the beginning, I want to set the active image by path. So we need to get the element by path itself and then just assign it. I don't believe we should have the current image equals to target image. Yeah, actually we would have to have that. But the next one, we're gonna take it. So current image is there. So we need to get the current element by this class. We're gonna assign the active image element equals or dot set dot class list dot remove. We're going to remove the active class from that. Then we're going to find the next element or const next active element equals document dot query selector, and we're going to say something like image with the selector. So image with the source set to our final value, and this should be current image. So once we get this thing, we set the next elements dot class list dot add, and then we set the active class to that, right? And we shouldn't have dot active here, but rather set active. So we start with the set active image by assigning it to the 0 1. And it could be the case that this active element doesn't even exist. So we're gonna put a condition here. If active image element, then we remove the class, otherwise we assign it to the next one. So we start with the 0 and let's see if this works. We got an error. So the error, failed to execute query selector on document image png is not a valid selector. So this says that this is not a valid selector, and that is right because we should have the quotation marks as well. So the quotation marks should go inside, otherwise it wouldn't understand this. So there we go. You can see that first we got this active element set, right? As you can see. So now this has the active class, and I'm gonna style it a bit later. What we have is, if I set another one, I think it should still work. So let's see. So we get the next element, we pass it. So if I click this, not exactly. So let's go towards sources, check this guy, refresh, play. And if I hit click here, oh, it doesn't let me click. Why? Oh, because the image itself. Interesting. So we got 2 images here. We would also have to change the z index of the non-active classes. So we would say something like z index -1, and the z index should be, let's say, 9 here. So I can still click it. So now if I click this, it comes inside, takes the next image, passes it, goes there, tries to find the active element right now, which is null. Interesting. Why? Interesting. If I refresh, the first time it comes here, it doesn't find it, sets it to null, goes forward. Ah, I see the problem. So this should rather be query selector instead of get element by ID, because it's not an ID. This should be this. So refresh, get the active element, doesn't find it, assigns the class to the next active element, which is an image, and adds the active class to it. Then if I click this guy, then it would again come inside, find the existing active element, remove the class active from it. You can see it goes away. And then it brings the next one, which is the next active element, and assigns the active class to it. Awesome, right? Super cool. I need to now contain it so it doesn't go outside of it or the images. So these should have a width of 100%, a height of 100%, so they don't go out, right? Now if I have this, you can see tish, tish, tish. Yay, super cool, right? So we're gonna set this here to width 100%, height 100%, just like this. And now you could have like multiple of them, so you could go ahead and enable these as well. And now there we go. So you click, you change in both directions. So how do we go about this? Do we implement keyframes, or should we, I mean, we could do it via keyframes, but we could also just give them some temporary classes and then go around with that, right? So yeah, maybe we could start with 2 keyframes. So we could say something like keyframe. We do slide to left. We would also have like slide to right. So 0% to 100%. Then we should also have slide from left and slide from right. So slide from right is going to be left 100% and 0. And then we are also going to have slide from left. So left -100% and left 0. And I think that should be it. If we have this slide to left, that would mean that it's going from left 0, which is opacity 1 and index 9, to opacity 0 and z index 1. So I'm also going to give this here -100, opacity 0, z index 1, and then the same to the other ones, left 100%, and then this. And then the rest of the ones like opacity 1 and z index 9 is going to be here, it's going to be here, and it's going to be here. Alrighty, now I could give this the directions. So we could say something like const directions equals to left, right, and then we could use the directions here. So we could say something like directions. And when we start here, we can say directions dot left, for example. And now that we have this, we can decide what classes to add. So I think we would have to remove the class. So if this is a direction, we would have to remove every class that we have. So we could say something like, let's say, we would have to change the classes to animation. So we could have something like image dot animation slide to left, and we're going to have further 4 animations. So slide to right, then we have slide from left, slide from right, and then we are going to say animation. We are going to call this slide. So we're going to try this with CSS animation. Let's see. So we're going to apply this. We could also have used from to as well, but yeah, I think maybe we can use from and to. And the idea would be animation name and animation duration. So we can use that. But there was also shorthand that I can't recall. Yeah, the shorthand property. So we can do something like this. So in this case, we're going to go to our code and we can say animation slide to left 0.3 second. I don't really need to do this, to be honest. So I can do this, 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 and this. And this should be slide to right, slide from left, and slide from right. Alrighty. Now that we have this, I think we could remove the classes. So we could rather do something like the class list itself is a DOM token list. It's not an array, but I believe it has for each. So we could do active dot class list dot for each CSS class. And here we could say if CSS class starts with animation. So if it starts with animation, we could use active element dot class list dot remove CSS class. Does that make sense? So it's going to remove all of the classes with animations, and then it's going to apply the next one based on the direction. So it's going to get the direction just like this. And based on the direction itself, once it has removed it, it's going to check the direction. So here, I think we can switch to the direction itself, or we could just say if the direction itself, if the direction is directions dot left, if it's a left direction, we do something, and else if it's the right direction, we're going to do something different. So if the direction is left, that would mean that we are going to add the class list of to the next element of animation, slide from right, and then the current element, active image element, would get a class list of slide animation, slide to left. So slide from right and slide to left. And let me know if I'm making a mistake there, but I think it's probably the right one. So slide to left, slide to right. I only have two different directions. So it's either going to be the left direction or the right direction. I could have used else if here as well, but I don't have any other case. So I think it's going to be, yeah, I don't really feel like there should be another if statement here, to be honest. So let's see if we are missing something. So it says cannot read property null reading class list. Okay. So if we go about here, it's going to create the images. It's going to come here in, and then it should go here, here. If there's an active image, it's going to come here. Oh, but because we don't really have active image in this case. Yeah, that's true. So if we don't have the active image, then we're gonna have to use that. So we could also have this done inside, but then we would be like putting the directions all over. If I don't do this, I would have to put the conditions at two places. Rather than that, I could have just one condition, but then even then I would have to have an if and else here as well. So I think it's just a matter of preference. So active element image would be having this. Otherwise, we're going to have this and keep everything else clean. Let's try this out. It's going to go and set image, go forward, and we didn't get any errors, which is good. So now let's have a quick look at the element itself and what this does. So first element has animation, slide from right, and that makes sense. But then also it should also get an active class, which I'm thinking, did we remove the class for active? So let's make the active class as well. And then we would have to add this next active class, class list dot add active. So now if we click left, it goes to slide. So in this case, when we add the set active image, it could get the current index and the direction is left, but then also this one should have the direction right. So now if I try to move it, this is probably the weirdest that I could see. From to, I think we can remove this, but then yeah, from, actually just go ahead and do this, from to, cool. So let's debug this guy and see where we are lacking. So if I press right, it comes inside active image element. It goes towards seeing the classes. We do have the class like animation slide from right. So it's going to remove this, right? And once it removes it, it should also remove the active class as well. I think that's what we haven't removed, to be honest. So this should remove first the active class, and then it should do the rest of the stuff. So let's quickly go ahead and do this. Now, if I click right, it would go and remove the active class. So it goes away, but then let me see one thing really quick. By default, they have this left -100 and opacity 0 and index 1. I don't think that should be the case, maybe. Or actually, the opacity should be 0. And left, I think left shouldn't be there. So now if I move forward, that's that. If I hit right, it goes inside, removes the active class, then goes inside here, starts with, then it removes the CSS class animation from right, then it goes forward. Direction is going to be left in this case, or actually right. So it's not going to go here. Then it's going to add animation slide to right. What have I done in this case? So we have for each, then we remove it. So if the direction is slide to left, slide to right, so it adds then it slide to left, but then that wouldn't matter because we have removed it. It's going to be a bit more complicated than I thought. Then it adds it and that's active. We clicked the right one. So if it's left, the next one should come from left. Can we have a slide from left? So it starts from left 0, -100%, then opacity 0 and index, and then it ends up with 0 left. I think that is okay. We're gonna figure it out. So I'm gonna go back to this one for the remaining of time. So let's look through this. So when we do set active image, we should first remove the animation and add it. Then we should also remove the active. On the other hand, we should start with the active and then we should remove it. Okay. And also for the active one, we do have the left 0 at the end. So let's see. If I go here, we do have the classlets removal. We remove the class, we assign a new class, and we remove active. And then the other one comes in. So if I do this, you see what's happening? So it fades in the next one, and then it adds to that. So it applies the active one, and then it moves forward. And let's see. So when we say animation, we do have linear and then we have 2 seconds. Because we are causing a delay as well. I don't think we are required to have a delay, to be honest, because we are causing a delay and then we are talking about how much time there should be. So it should be 0.3 seconds for this, right? So for this one, it seems good, but it seems like we have reversed our situation. So for the right click, we do assign this direction right. It goes inside and let's see. So when we click this, the one that's supposed to go out goes fine, but the one that comes in is reversed. So when the direction is right, actually, I now like the suggestion from just me to just put it at least for the readability. So we got this if direction right. So when the direction is right, we're supposed to remove the one that's fine, but the one that's coming in, it should be slide from left. So if we go for slide from left, we are assigning, there we go. That's the problem. So we have 2 slide from left. So this should be slide from right. And now if I try this, yay! Awesome. Awesome. So I think we are at a good point of understanding what we had. So if I just repeat for you, what happens is when we click the left button, we make the current one go out of the screen, slide to left. The other one comes from right, so slide from right. Then when we click this one, it goes slide to right, the current one, and the next one comes from left. So that's what we are trying to do. So for the case of directions left, we go slide to left, the current one goes to left. Can I do left? Yeah. And then the other one comes from right. So the other one comes from right. And that's how this is working. So now we have a JavaScript plus CSS element that is infinite based off of it, and it looks good as well. Now you could add certain delays to it if you wanted, but I wouldn't go to that route. So we are doing 2 important things there. One, that these animations are taking place. Then we also do another important thing, that is we have the default and the active states aligned. So in the default one, we make sure that the left, can I remove this left and see what happens? So if I refresh this, yeah, this works. Can I also remove the opacity 1 and 9? No, I cannot. So the only thing that really matters is the left one. Can I fix this again? Yeah. And we don't do the left positioning in either the default styles or the active one. We do handle the opacity and the Z index. But in the animations, in all of the animations, we do work with the opacity and the Z index as well. If we remove opacity from here, then you will not probably see this like blurry effect that we are getting. For example, if we were to remove the opacity from here, oops, if I did this, have I left it somewhere? No, because it actually, I can also remove the Z index because the opacity is taking in from the active class. Oh, wait a second. So we did have, if I do this, let's see. So if I remove opacity and Z index from, let's see, slide to left. So Z index gone, Z index gone, and Z index gone, and both of these gone. And we should have just the left 0 here. So now, yes, When we are applying the active class, it moves that, and we are also just moving the other parts of it, which is the left one. If we wanted to do this, or if we wanted to keep all of these like z index, I do also want to try one more thing. So if we wanted to do this, then would that mean I can remove all of this? No, because during the animation, you would see them. But in order for them to stay like that in the end, you would have to have this active class. And once we are having them already, I think it makes sense to just keep them. Like you can see that now. So during the animation, they do see, you do see the opacity there, but at the end you would also need them. So I think what I could do is I could just work with the opacity and remove the, or work with left and remove everything else. So opacity index gone, 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 and gone. So we are only working with the left one. There you go. Awesome, super cool. So I think we're going to keep it at that. If you've got any questions, please let me know. One more thing, or one last thing that I would like to do is just to commit this so everybody can see and play around with these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create, let me see. We have two different variations of this one. I believe we could keep them in one branch, to be honest, or we could have a different one for the JavaScript only. So let's do this. We got this file changes that we did. I'm going to quickly see if there's anything that I need to remove from the code before we commit this and push this. So let's open this status. We're going to say git commit. We can say JS plus CSS slider, JavaScript and CSS slider using multiple images on DOM per se. Git add, commit, and then we can push it as well. But I also want to go back to my main branch and then just take another branch from it, or we can say JS only slider, and then we have it. Cool. Now I can go back to my main branch and I can now push this to GitHub. So let's quickly do that. So we're going to go to code with SN, and in here we are going to create a new branch or new repository. We're going to call this JS slider, make it public, no git ignore, no license yet, and we can add this like this. I'm gonna add the git remote, and then we can say git push q origin main. This should be pushed, and then we can push the rest of them. So git push all. So we pushed the other branches as well, and now we can essentially go ahead and create a pull request. So first of all, the code should be there, as you can see. Now I could go to pull request and actually do JS CSS slider. We can have the pull request created. Assign yourself, and I think we should be good. The last thing that I would want to do is to enable GitHub pages to this, so we can import this. The only thing that I'm concerned about is the base href. Let's see. So when we add the GitHub pages, let's first merge this, delete the branch, go to settings, pages, deploy from a branch, no, and main, root, save. And then I think the only thing that would be interesting is I believe it's not going to work unless we have defined a base href, but let's see. .github.io. So it's probably being deployed at the moment. Yeah, this is running it. Does it already says the base href? Maybe it does. We're going to see. We're going to see. And what does it do in deploy? Okay, let's see. There we go. So it does handle the base href thing. Thank God. Okay, so now this CSS slider is basically working. So I can quickly copy this, paste this in here as well. JavaScript, CSS, slider, code with SN. Maybe you can find it. There we go. I don't think there should be releases or environments or packages. There we go. Awesome. So this is a very basic one. So I'm going to quickly paste this in the chat as well, in case any one of you wants to try this or try it later with the videos and whatnot. So yeah, that's pretty much it. All right. So I hope that you liked the video. If you did, press the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel for the next videos because they're going to be super awesome. And if you have any ideas or any requests for certain type of projects that you want me to bring to this channel, just let me know in the comments and I would be happy to entertain them. As always, happy coding. I'm going to see you in the next video.